Well, welcome back to another video where I have literally no idea what I'm doing anymore with my photography, but I do just keep telling myself that I am creating a piece titled The Art of Not Having a Clue. This week I recently managed to pick up an Olympus XA2, so I just wanted to kind of talk you through my first time out shooting with this camera and just give you some first impressions. First, a little bit of backstory to the Olympus XA2. The XA2 came out in 1980 and production continued until 1986. The Olympus XA2 is a direct follow-up to the original Olympus XA. The Olympus XA is the far more capable alternative, although the prices it's currently listed at, it is also the far more expensive alternative. The wonderful designer of this camera, Yoshihisa Mitani, came out with this back in 1980, and it very quickly gained traction as it was 25% cheaper than the original Olympus XA. However, with a 25% price reduction, it obviously meant there were certainly some limitations. Some of these limitations included a fixed aperture, there was a fully automatic metering system, and there was only zone focusing with this camera. So you could not adjust the aperture. Unlike the original XA, this has a zone focusing system. So if you are thinking of buying an Olympus XA or an XA2, do bear in mind that the XA2 only has 3 settings to choose from when it comes to its focus settings, and you cannot control the aperture for varying your exposure settings. However, if you are thinking of picking up an XA, they were very thoughtful and very kind, and they decided to bring this out in black, blue, white, red, and a very special commemorative pink. Ultimately though, one thing that they absolutely did not get rid of was this incredibly annoying battery check. God, that never gets any easier to hit. Anyway, let's move on to looking at some of the photos that come out of this camera. Today we're heading off into the wonderful city of Bristol down here in the southwest of England to shoot a roll of Kodak Gold 200. Prior to purchasing this camera, I had spent what felt like hours researching exactly how to load this camera. I had watched very in-depth videos, so when it came to loading this camera, I thought I'd have it licked. Although, as you can see here, I decided to try and put the film in upside down. This is really showing that I've never done this before. Anyway, after I decided to stop lacking any brain cells, I managed to load that roll into the camera and managed to get going with my first exposures.
Melon.
You can film that.
Hi. Hi.
About 2 seconds after I'd taken this photo, I realized I'd made the biggest rookie error you can make with this camera, and I'd forgot to adjust the zone focusing slider to infinity. Now, this sounds really stupid, but ultimately it's easily done, because one of the limitations of this camera is every time you set the zone focus to wherever you want, if it's anywhere other than the middle setting, when you close the lens door, it pops straight back down to the middle. So if you forget to readjust the zone focus, then A, you're an idiot, and B, well, fair enough. It's ultimately one of the main issues I have with this camera, and something that I continue to forget until I was about halfway through this roll of film. So I do think if you use this camera enough, you will totally remember that that's one of the things that you have to just adjust. But if you're thinking you can literally just pull it out your pocket and be ready to shoot it at any point, do not forget to adjust that slider. So the 3 zones that you actually do have available to you on this camera are as follows. You have this bottom here, which is for subjects within about 1.5 meters away from you. Then moving it to the middle position, this is for what they call a group zone focus setting, so subjects up to about 3 meters away. And then the only other alternative you have is flicking it all the way to the top setting, and then you're on to the infinity mode. These next shots were okay. I cropped the shot down from landscape to portrait, and I think it makes the composition overall look a lot better. Obviously, I also had to get the classic suspension bridge shot, but once again, I forgot to adjust the zone focusing system. I have no idea why I took this photo. It's not good composition at all, and ultimately I hate it. But I did think that the Citroen Ami looked just quite interesting sat here. This next shot I absolutely love. I specifically wanted to go back here because I had taken a photo of this exact composition about a year ago on the Panasonic Lumix GX80, and ultimately I just wanted to try and compare the two. I think it's quite interesting to see the differences between film and digital, and ultimately in this case I think the film photo looked a lot better. Being in the Clifton Village area of Bristol, we were absolutely surrounded by Georgian architecture, so of course I had to get a photo of that. After deciding that we had had enough of being up in the Clifton Village area, we decided to head back down into the city centre and headed around the Harbourside area to try and make the most of the sun that was now finally poking through the clouds. I like both of these shots. I think the shot with the foreground here does look a little bit better, but as was the case with some of the shots in this roll, it's a little bit underexposed. The shadows just have absolutely no detail and ultimately just look a little bit flat. I guess you could also say this is definitely a part of the camera's limitations because there is a fixed aperture and you cannot change the shutter speed yourself automatically. You are limited to just adjusting the ISO switch. I did get some feedback from the analog community subreddit that said that the XA2 does sometimes have some difficulty exposing shots, especially if there's potentially a bit of dust or something blocking your light meter. So it is just something to bear in mind, and potentially the next time I put a roll of film through this, I might end up overexposing it by a stop or two, just because a lot of the shadows in these photos ended up coming out really flat and there was just no detail. Also though, do bear in mind that Kodak Gold was the film that was being used here, and it is one of the cheaper film stocks, and it is also well known that in slightly overcast or cloudy conditions where the sun's coming in and out, this film stock really does struggle. I love this little narrowboat that's parked up here. It's been sat here for quite a while and sadly it's starting to fall into a bit of a state of disrepair. But I've shot it before on my old digital camera, and honestly, I cannot tell you how much better the shots look on this XA2. I love this spot here. This is a well-known skating spot outside the old Lloyds Bank building here in Bristol, and I thought I would make the most of the skaters being around here and try and see how good the shutter speed is on this camera. I was really happy how these shots turned out. For subjects that were moving pretty quickly, the camera held up pretty well and it didn't struggle at all, even when the clouds came over and there wasn't much light. So of this 36 roll exposure, I would say I was extremely happy with these 3 shots, and they are definitely keepers. So what are my overall first impressions of this camera? For its price, its size, and its use case being a quite limited point and shoot beginner camera, it's incredible. I've managed to pick up this model here, which is pretty much in near mint condition, with the original box and the A11 flash for around £70 on eBay, which is about the going rate, although some can come a little bit more expensive, and some which don't have the A11 flash included or the original box you can pick up for a little bit cheaper. The photos it takes are also absolutely stunning. I've absolutely fallen in love with the film look, and I think I will probably end up shooting a lot more of it. Rest in peace to my bank account. It's also a really comfortable camera to use. The size is a bit of a limitation. I did find that in a couple of the shots I managed to get my finger in the way of the lens. Even though I didn't think I had, I still managed to do so, and it is a known thing on this camera, so do just bear in mind that you do need to just hold this camera at either end. Another thing I would like to say about this is the shutter button is extremely sensitive. Even the lightest press and the shutter's gonna go off. So I would honestly recommend when you're walking around, just keep the shutter door shut. It means that you won't be setting off any accidental exposures. I have heard of stories of people with this camera, they're walking around with the door open and their fingers resting on the shutter button and they've accidentally taken a shot. I'd also say, as you're composing your image, just keep your finger off the trigger because you can accidentally photo quite easily. So in mixed lighting conditions, I'm very happy with how this camera performed. However, I am going to be taking it out soon to try and test out its night photography capabilities with a roll of CineStill 800T, although I'm sure by the time I get those photos back, the T will just stand for tragic.